A quiet day, a loud reckoning. Ilara Vance was just a woman on a Saturday morning. With her second trimester belly gently rounding beneath a comfortable hoodie, she navigated the aisles of a suburban grocery store. The sky was a soft, forgettable gray, and the receipt in her bag was still warm. It should have been a day that blurred into the rhythm of errands and quiet thoughts about her growing family. But for Ilara, this ordinary day in the quiet town of Willow Creek would become the moment her existence was reduced to a fleeting stereotype, and the nation would bear witness to the shocking price of a baseless assumption. The officer's commands were sharp and immediate. On the ground, Ilara, startled, responded calmly, "I'm pregnant." They repeated the order, their voices laced with impatience that felt like an accusation. Confused, she asked why. Before she could finish her question, the cold asphalt slammed against her cheek. Her body, the one so carefully nurturing a new life, was suddenly a weight to be pinned, pressed down by two uniforms who hadn't even bothered to ask her name. They didn't check the grocery bag. They didn't ask to see the receipt. In their minds, a quick, dangerous algorithm had run its course. Black hoodie, a vague description, and a woman of color alone in a parking lot. A bystander cried out. Someone else began to record. But nothing could stop what was happening. Ilara didn't fight back. She didn't scream. With a voice tight with rising fear, she whispered through gritted teeth, "Please call my husband." One of the officers scoffed. "He's a lawyer." The other chuckled without looking up. Ilara tried to continue. "He's a director of—" But they didn't let her finish. To them, her words were a predictable, desperate attempt to invoke a privilege she didn't possess. In this parking lot, in this neighborhood where the myth of safety had always been conditional, she was just another problem to be neutralized. But what they couldn't have known, what they never stopped to imagine, was that the man on the other end of that missed call wasn't just any husband. He was Julian Vance, the newly appointed director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. It was a man whose job was to investigate the very kind of misconduct unfolding on the asphalt, a man whose principled silence after that night would be more deafening than any protest. This is not a story about privilege. It's about a single, fatal assumption. It's a story about what happens when authority is wielded without accountability, when power loses patience, and when a person's dignity is discarded before their identity is ever heard. This wasn't fiction. This wasn't a drama on a screen. This was a single act of prejudice, so careless it lit the fuse of a reckoning that could no longer be delayed. A system unveiled. Ilara woke up that morning like any other weekday, before the sun, before her two children stirred, before her husband's second alarm. She packed 2 school lunches, kissed them goodbye, and drove to the store with her mind on lesson plans, a coming pediatric appointment, and the gentle flutters in her belly. She wore a comfortable gray hoodie with a school mascot on the back. She wasn't trying to make a statement. She was just trying to make it through the day. Inside the store, a store employee hesitated. Something about Ilara's appearance didn't sit right. Perhaps it was a hoodie. Or maybe it was the way unconscious bias can morph into action before reason can intervene. A call was made to the local precinct. A woman matching a vague description, possibly shoplifting. Officers Reynolds and Cole received the dispatch and pulled into the lot. They saw a woman unlocking her car, a silver sedan, to put away her groceries. She was not loud. She was not in a hurry. She was simply putting her things away with a quiet sigh. But to them, this was a suspicious activity they were told to find. "Ma'am, we need you to stop and sit on the curb," Officer Reynolds commanded. Ilara looked up, startled. "Is something wrong?" she asked, the receipt still in her hand. "Just do as you're told," snapped Officer Cole. Ilara, confused but composed, stated she was pregnant and would prefer to stand. "I'm not resisting," she explained. "I just don't understand why I'm being stopped." Her words were calm and measured, the way black women are so often taught to speak in these moments, when a tone could be misinterpreted as a threat. But the officers didn't hear her tone. They only saw her standing. When she hesitated for a single beat, Officer Reynolds moved first. A shove, a turn. The world tilted, and the asphalt hit her with brutal force. Her elbow scraped concrete. Her unborn child kicked hard. A bystander gasped. "She didn't do anything," someone yelled. Ilara's voice broke. "I'm pregnant. I'm not resisting. Please stop." But the officers weren't listening to her. They were listening to their own urgency, their own training, their own deeply ingrained biases. When Ilara spoke of her husband, Officer Cole muttered, "If he's so important, why isn't he here?" Another nearby shopper yelled that they saw her pay for everything. But the situation was no longer about a potential theft. It was about control. It was about domination. And Ilara realized with a sinking dread that they weren't interested in questions, only conclusions. Back at FBI headquarters, Julian felt a cold dread as Ilara missed his midday call. Then another and another. His gut told him something was wrong. Meanwhile, a sergeant arrived at the parking lot. An elderly woman, phone trembling in her hands, showed him a short but clear video of Ilara paying at the register. The sergeant's face tightened. He looked at Officers Reynolds and Cole. "Get her up now." By the time Julian's team traced her last known location to the grocery store, the viral videos had already begun to circulate. A subordinate approached him, visibly shaken, and a story began to unravel. A black woman detained, an unconfirmed ID, a description that matched his wife. Julian didn't shout. He didn't panic. He simply said, "Where is she now?" and left the room, redefining justice. Ilara's wrist was swollen, her face scraped. She sat in the back of a police car, uncuffed now. A young, cautious female officer asked her gently if she needed someone to call. Ilara nodded. "My husband, Julian Vance." She paused. "He's the director of the FBI." The officer's eyes widened. She walked away, fumbling for her phone. In that instant, the narrative shifted. The suspect had a name, a story, and a connection that demanded accountability. But Julian wasn't coming for revenge. He was coming for answers. He didn't want to protect power. He wanted to expose the absence of it. Because Ilara was not an exception. She was a rule that too many Americans live by, that blackness in public could be met with suspicion and force before words. Julian arrived at the hospital just before midnight, alone. He saw the bandages, the sterile beeping machines, but it was her eyes that gutted him. Not rage or pain, but a deep, unspeakable weariness. He wrapped her hand gently in his, and for the first time that day, she closed her eyes. Neither of them slept because they both knew what came next wasn't about a single incident. It was about proving a systemic failure. Ilara didn't go on television. Instead, she accepted a single invitation to speak before the local legislative council during their police budget hearings. She placed a photograph on the podium, a classroom of 23 third graders. "These are my students," she said, "and I want you to know what happens when they're told without words that their skin makes them suspicious." She didn't speak about herself until 5 minutes in. She told her story not as a victim, but as a teacher and a witness. "I was stopped without question. I was pinned without resistance. I was presumed guilty before anyone asked me a single thing." She looked directly into the eyes of the lawmakers. "What will you do when it's your child face down on the sidewalk?" Her testimony didn't trend on social media, but it was written into the official record. Her voice, steady and factual, was legally archived not as outrage, but as evidence. She filed a civil suit not against the officers, but against the police department and its training division, demanding transparency. She wanted their training curriculum. The results were shocking. 2 optional PowerPoint presentations from years ago, when the city offered a high-figure settlement with a confidentiality clause. Ilara declined. "I don't need money," she said. "I need your oath to reform." Her conditions were clear: mandatory yearly bias evaluations and new training modules co-developed by educators and community panels. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a condition. Ilara's presence became a reminder that justice isn't what happens in courtrooms. It's what happens in city council chambers where dignity must be reintroduced as law. Her lawsuit became a template for others seeking systemic accountability. She returned to her classroom with a new assignment on the board. What does it mean to be believed? The twist had never been about power. It was about making the truth undeniable, so the system could no longer pretend not to see. Julian and Ilara welcomed their daughter, Naomi, into a quieter world a year later. They never moved away. They stayed in the same neighborhood, the same schools, and shopped at the same grocery store. Because real change doesn't come from escaping. It comes from staying and making things better. What do you think Alara's final line about forgiveness says about the difference between accountability and personal feelings?